You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about our current sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. As you well know, if you've been following This is Oklahoma, they've been a huge part of this podcast. So this podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling an Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Also, for the podcast, a new sponsor, RCB Bank. Since 1936, RCB Bank has offered progressive products and a friendly service. Come in today to find out more about their loan promotion on new, used, refinanced cars, boats, campers, and ATVs. Visit RCB Bank to learn more. RCB Bank, that's my bank. With approved credit, restrictions apply. Now, let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host. Back with another episode down at the Contemporary Art Museum today. Huge shout out to them for having us. We're down here with my guest Heather Rouba. Thank you so much for coming down. I'm excited to get to know you a bit more and for our listeners to get to know you. They might have seen some of the stuff that you've done or seen that you work with Smith Pickel now, who we've previously had Matt on as a guest, and learned all about the amazing buildings that Smith Pickel and the impact that Smith Pickel has in Oklahoma City. But before we dive into current times, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I grew up in Mustang. I was born in Tulsa, grew up in Mustang, graduated high school there, grew up in a family of 6 kids. I was number 2.
Yeah.
And spent my summers usually elsewhere. Always went back and forth between my dad and my mom's family, since that was kind of the arrangement since I was born. And yeah, it was a really great upbringing.
Yeah. So a Mustang out in the country?
It wasn't really out in the country. No. I mean, it was in Mustang proper, but
yeah, so not
definitely rural compared to Oklahoma City for sure.
Right, and you're 2 in the line of 6.
I am, yes.
Older brother or older sister?
I have an older sister.
Okay.
And she and I are from my dad and my mom, and then my mom and dad divorced when I was a baby, just a couple months in, and then she remarried and had 4 more right after. So we all kind of grew up as a big group with my mom and my stepmom, or my mom and my stepdad, and he was pretty much my dad.
All right. So growing up then around, like a lot of kids and family and in Mustang, do you get into, obviously you work in architecture now. Are you interested in architecture at a young age, or are you interested in sport? Like, what was your kind of high school and stuff like that?
When I was young, sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so
sorry.
I might be clearing my throat a lot, but I was really interested in fashion. I was interested in design. I was really meticulous. My son came to me the other day, he's 10, and told me that he needed to spend some time rearranging his room, and I was like, I know where that came from. I spent most of my time studying makeup, hair, indoor. I was an indoor girl for sure, and but I also found myself being really engineering minded. So I was like the fix-it person in the family. Out of the 6 kids and my parents, I was the only one that ever really did much of that. And so I think that's how my mind was wired. And I was also really pretty artistic and creative. And so all of those things sort of led me to both of my career directions, which I feel like are they coincide nicely.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up with kind of like the love of fashion and kind of cosmetics and stuff like that, when you're growing up and you follow your dad with your height, so people, when you as a kid you stand out, right, because you're a lot taller, especially as a female. Is the eye on, I want to get into modeling or doing shows or fashion, or from like a middle to high school age before you go into college?
I can track back to kindergarten,
really
wanting to model.
Okay.
It's ironic because who knew if I would actually be able to?
Right.
But even my kindergarten teacher, which I randomly ran into a couple years ago, she actually identified my daughter and recognized my daughter and remembered me.
That's awesome.
I know, random, but Anyway, as early as kindergarten, I was really interested in the fashion industry, and my family could not be further from that. And so it was sort of my own endeavor.
Yeah.
And then the architecture came a little bit later. I would say I kind of put all of those pieces together in my mind around high school age for that. But very much still focused on the fashion side, and that was what I pursued first.
Yeah. So you start modeling, and then you get picked up and noticed, and people start coming to you and saying, hey, let's go, we would like to hire you and be a model. And that whole process as you're going through high school?
It is a very ambiguous industry. And growing up in rural Oklahoma, clearly there's not a lot of opportunity. Also, being one of 6 kids, I mean, I was not the focus of my parents' lives. And so if I wanted to get somewhere, I was going to have to pursue it. So I really sort of followed my own heart, if you will, and somehow the cards aligned. I did a pageant, in my late teen years, the Miss Teen Oklahoma USA pageant, did well with that, ended up finding a local agent that I started doing some local work here. But it was when I graduated high school, some girlfriends of mine and I went down to Dallas just to shop. And of course, the cliche, got scouted in the mall. And next thing I know, I'm in New York and signing in Germany and Miami Beach. And
life takes off from that point.
Yeah, it's sort of taking off. However, I didn't really feel like I had a huge idea of where exactly I was headed. I was just kind of like, okay, this is, for the first time in my life, I'm doing something that I feel like I'm really, really good at, and I'm really passionate about. And so I was just kind of riding the wave. Yeah,
you're like, the timing's great. I've got, why not? I'm passionate about this. Let's go all in. And you get put in that world, and now you're traveling. You have contracts. You have, like I said, you're getting signed everywhere. And I can't imagine what it's like going from Mustang growing up to going to New York, right at the in your late teens. And
I was ready.
Yeah,
I was so ready.
That's so good.
No, I was like ready to get out and spread my wings and go take on the world. To be honest, I don't know where that came from. But
back to like growing up and being one of the oldest and having to figure out stuff on your own. I guess that's why you're probably ready, right? Because you weren't like, Mom, Dad, will you come with me? Like you were like, no. I can do this.
There was no way I was going to get that kind of guidance, so I knew that it needed to be my own initiative. But I think I was also a little bit more driven than maybe my siblings were growing up, and just wanted different things. And it was certainly of my own doing. It was never an influence of my family at all. It was just like an individual passion I just had innately.
So not having like the go get it like kind of passion from family and around that, where do you get that from? I'm
not quite sure. It might come from my bio dad. He played basketball in college. He was a college athlete, played basketball at OSU, and I know that takes a certain level of commitment and drive. And so perhaps from that side, my dad's side of the family is also extremely successful.
Yeah.
And have done a lot. They live all over the U.S. and have amazing stories. And so perhaps that was an innate thing in me. But outside of that, I'm not really quite sure. It was just something that was just always in me.
Yeah. And you see that. And I guess, you're right. I mean, you have that side from your dad, and with their family being all over and successful, like, well, I can do that, even though it's not in your own home at the time, and your own dad taking care of the kids or whatever. You're like, there's no reason I can't do that.
Correct.
Nothing's stopping me. Nothing's holding me back.
I did start traveling. When I did travel, I traveled with my dad when I was there in the summers, and so I got out and saw some things and maybe had a little bit of a vignette of what I wanted later in life.
Mm-hmm. So you get spotted in the mall and signed, and then where's that first trip? Is it New York?
It was New York, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I did work in Dallas.
Sure.
And obviously, I still had my agent here in town, but I went to New York, and then I went to Miami Beach. And then it was around that time my stepdad, who I consider my dad, had raised me since I was 2 months old. He had congestive heart failure and wasn't doing well. And it was around that time that he finally got a heart transplant and passed away. Oh, wow. And it sort of redirected what I wanted. And I think in part it was influenced by what I thought he might have wanted for me.
Sure.
I don't really look back with a regret per se, but it definitely shifted where I was headed in my path.
So at that point, then, do you step away from modeling and go a different route?
I did, completely.
Yeah.
I did.
What do you go into?
I actually was a missionary. I went and became a missionary in California. I was raised Mormon.
Okay.
And I went out there, Spanish speaking. It's a huge commitment. I don't know if you know much about Mormon missions, but it is like full time.
Right.
You don't watch TV. You don't call your friends back home. You're not no
you're
connection.
You're in a totally different world now.
To anyone but the work you're doing, and it's 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it was quite a shift. I loved it and really poured myself into the volunteerism aspect of it, of really just giving back and giving to to who was in need, and that has certainly shaped my life now and how I try to balance my life with giving and volunteerism and giving back to the community that raised me. So I feel like that the missionary work was giving back to my dad that raised me.
Yeah.
I feel like my work now is giving back to the community that raised me, my Oklahoma community.
And you mentioned Spanish. You learned Spanish while you were out there? I did.
I still speak Spanish. I came back actually and worked for Midland Mortgage and helped open their Spanish-speaking department.
Okay.
I was doing finance at the time.
Yeah.
So I helped them open that, did that, shifted into that. And then when I married my husband, he is from Belarus and Russian speaking. And once we had kids, he only spoke Russian. So I really haven't had a chance to use the Spanish until now, getting back into construction. Obviously, I do have opportunities that present themselves to revitalize that, that skill. But
yeah, so you come back from doing your missionary work. You're now fluent speaking in Spanish. What time, like how old are you at that point, and then where do you go from there to transition into, like, do you go back to modeling or do you transition into the architecture world?
No, so I got back, I was about 23 years old, and I applied to the University of Central Oklahoma, and I got their Presidential Leadership Scholarship. So it's, you're pretty committed on maintaining a certain GPA, you're committed to being involved in a minimum of 3 organizations on campus and in a leadership role. So again, this is pushing my leadership skills, pushing me to be outward. And while I'm doing my studies, which I studied interior design and I minored in art history, I'm also engaging in my community at the time. And so that was a really great segue, and I got really plugged into all the leaders there because I ended up working for Dr. Webb on campus, and still to this day, I'm close friends with several of the VPs and the leaders that were there at that time.
So at that time, you think, I'm going to go down back to my kind of passion of architecture and artwork, and that's where my job's going to be in. At that time in your life, you wanted to get that. And
I was against going to college unless I had a desire to get a degree that was going to be relevant.
Right. I mean, that is normal now, but back then it probably wasn't. People were like, oh,
everybody gets a degree. I felt like you just go get a degree and it doesn't matter what you get. But I felt like if I'm going to go get a degree, I want this degree to be necessary for me to work in that trade. And so again, architecture was kind of my thought process. So I'm thinking I'm going to do architecture. However, UCO didn't have that. So I did interior design, which I focused on interior architecture. So I worked for commercial interior design firms, including University of Central Oklahoma has a architectural and engineering services department, which I helped open their interior design department. So I was
that was after you graduated, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, so at UCO, you're learning all this stuff. You're in the community. You have the scholarship, and you're kind of like diving all in because that's just now who you are and what you do. Is if you're going to do something, you throw yourself into it. Do you start modeling again? Because you were like former Mrs. Oklahoma, right?
At that point, I wasn't.
Okay.
But
so that comes later.
I did get reconnected with my agent that I had in high school, which was local. And her name was Patty Gears. She owned Harrison Gears Modeling Agency and really was the only agency here. But she did pass away when I was 25. So in my college years, while I was studying, she passed. And I reached out to her husband, asked him if I could take over the company. He was so heartbroken, he ended up just not wanting to even go through all of her material. And so let that go. And I found an agent in Tulsa. Okay. So that was the only agency at the time. And then fast forward, after I'm in my career, I decided to take a step away because I had my first child and thought I needed to stay home with her for a while, which served me very well because I later found out she had Asperger's. And so I was able to be there and available for her. But it was during that time that I decided to do Mrs. Oklahoma because staying home full time was getting me really antsy. And so I wanted to volunteer. And I thought if I have an opportunity to do it through an organization, that would be better. Somebody had asked me to do Mrs. Oklahoma, and I thought this could be a really good way to plug into the community again, give back while I'm also raising my kids. And so that's how that unfolded.
And I'm sure, like you mentioned, you're getting antsy. Like, you're always on the move. You're always doing something. And then having a child is no easy task. And raising a child, I'm sure, is no easy task. I have no experience of that. But I see my nephews and nieces, and I'm happy to give them back to their mom and dads.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
But, you're like, there's part of you that says like, I have time, I can do something, let me do something and give back. And then that, you know, the growing up, just giving back in general and getting that side from family, you know, and then put the modeling thing in it too. A lot of people don't realize that the people who win Mrs. Oklahoma or Miss Oklahoma or pageant stuff, they don't realize the amount of, you know, the amount of things the organization does to give back, right? They just see, you know, a woman walking around with a crown and a sachet and she's smiling and taking photos.
And we only do that during the competition.
Exactly, right? They don't
no
see
do
like
that.
Yeah, and they don't see, I mean, now they probably might see it a bit more with social media, but they don't see you engaging the community, going out and speaking and having an impact. So that's why when you get that, you now are on the, I guess you're on a circuit, right? That they're like, hey, here's all these events. Which ones do you want to go to?
It was a way to catapult or give me a platform to get out. So I capitalized on that, and you know, you're required to make 12 appearances in that given year, and I did over 250 that year. I was just ready to do whatever the community needed. I worked with the Allied Arts. I worked with Calm Waters, which is an organization that is geared towards children who are grieving either a divorced parent situation or death of a parent, which I had experienced both at this point, so I felt like I was able to help. And then I also worked with the Oklahoma Marriage Initiative, which also I trained parents that were second-time parents through that organization. And then I mean, you name it, I was speaking all the time or volunteering with anything that anybody needed that I could make time for. So.
And raising a child.
It was a great year. Oh, yes, of course, obviously. Yes, that was my number one priority, but I was taking advantage of the opportunity to just plug in.
Yeah, and all of that was around Oklahoma, Oklahoma City,
Oklahoma.
Or just the state?
I went to Tulsa a lot.
Okay.
I did some remote towns. I'd have to go back and look. It's been over a decade now, but definitely got up to Tulsa quite a bit, but primarily in the metro.
And from that, does kind of like, did that, after you had your year, any Mrs. Oklahomas that came after you, I mean, they've gone from probably doing 12 events, right? Every year someone's done 12 events, and then you come in and do 200 plus, and you're like...
They certainly scaled back.
Yeah.
However, I got
but
to
you
crown...
kind of set the standard, didn't you? So like anyone else who came after you...
I don't want to call it a standard. I think you can make that year whatever you want it to be. That was what I needed and wanted it to be. And my successor happened to be my best friend, and she had her purpose with her daughter. And so everybody has what they want to give and get out of that. And I was able to do that.
Right. I guess it just speaks to kind of the person you are and the amount of things, you know, when you do something, you are going all in on
that. Is very true. Matt actually said that. He's like, so I've learned that there's only two speeds to Heather. There's like stop or go.
There's like fully on or fully off. Yeah.
Definitely how I work.
Yeah. So you do this, you know, you have a year on the road, basically. You're doing these events, community impact as Mrs. Oklahoma. Does that kind of pique the interest about getting back into modeling again? Like about like really getting back into the industry?
Like what you said, I merged my ability. Some people would use me for advertising, and I certainly did that for free.
Right.
And also did a lot of other things in the community. So it sort of did merge those two for me. And I ended up meeting one of my sponsors. I got everything sponsored that year. And my hair sponsor was Anthony David. And one day we were talking, and he was like, I'm just really impressed with what you've done with your year. I really want to go into business with you. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? What are we going to do? And he's like, I want to do a modeling agency. And I was like, you know, that's pretty relevant. There's not one here in the city. I have a background in that. And we could certainly do something here. So we went into business together that year. We started it that year. And so that became my focus once I gave up my title. And then about 2 years in, I bought him out, rebranded it, and it's been my baby ever since. And that was about the time, it was about 2 or 3 years in when I started placing models in national positions and then also internationally as well. So it was a really fun time and a really fun ride that I focused solely on outside of raising my kids, because I now have 3. But that was what I did until I came back to the industry I'm in now. Yeah,
and that, for people listening, that is Brink Models.
Brink Model Management, yes. Okay. That is what I've been working on for the past 12 years, building that brand, building the capability to scout, train, identify talent that I know what markets they would do well in, how to get them prepared. And then I have models that honestly live all over the world now.
Yeah.
And I have a partner in Montreal and I have a partner in Nashville, and they manage most of my out of town models. I have a couple that are just kind of my children at this point. I manage them still, but and then we have a group of local models. So at any given time, we're going to manage about 90, give or take, models. Out of state models, we'll probably have about 20 to 30 that are capable of doing that. Out of that, we'll probably have a handful that are every day working.
Yeah.
It's a very, very selective industry. It's very hard to get into. But I've been doing it long enough and have been partners with the agencies around the world for long enough that I know exactly what they're looking for and I can help.
And you built a trusted reputation with them. And,
Absolutely.
And, you know, integrity and all the rest of it. They know exactly who you are and what you do.
That surpasses it all. One of the things about the model lifestyle and the livelihood of a model is that it's going to be short-lived. And so one of the things that I bank on, my relationships with my agents around the world and my scouts, they know that I'll bring them a model that will work for maybe 5 years, and then I'll bring them another model. And so it's about that trust with me, and they know that I understand the talent that they're looking for and how to get where they need to be. So that's been, honestly, I will say that is one of the things that has helped me in my role now.
Okay.
Because I do a lot of things at Smith and Pickel, but primarily business development, community relations, and building and developing long-term relationships is something that I'm very familiar with because of my agency.
Right. Yeah. And this theme is coming through this story, and I'm sure it's going to continue, is the fact that like you weave and bring everything that you've done, you kind of bring it all together to whatever it is you're working on now. Absolutely. Which is really cool to see. You mentioned, as having the agency and training models, you've been pretty successful at training models after doing some research, right? You've had a lot of Miss Oklahomas and stuff like that.
Thank you. Yes. So when I won Mrs. Oklahoma, I honestly didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
I just think it was like luck of the draw. And so I was trained to go to the national competition, and I learned so many tools. So the way I saw it was I started scouting at pageants, because it's a great place to find beautiful girls and not guys in the pageantry, but beautiful girls. So I'm scouting them from there. They have these skill sets that they come along with because they can walk, they can talk, they can have, conversation with you. It's really great. Believe it or not, most of our teenage girls that come in can't do those things. And so I'm having to work with them. But as I started building up this team, I thought I could scout. I could do the reverse, and I could scout for the pageant as well within my agency. And so I started doing that, and I ended up having 5 back-to-back winners. I mean, I was on a roll there for a minute. So I won the first 2 years, and then the next year I had the top 3. The next year I had the top 5. The next year I had the Miss and the Teen. And it was a lot of fun for me, because the way I saw it is that I'm taking this raw talent, I'm training them, but just giving them an opportunity to stand up against the other girls and know what they're doing, which I didn't have. So again, it's really just about equipping them with the tools they need to be successful in whatever it is that they're after. So
that can be very expensive to do that for the girls, right?
Yes.
Like, that's not cheap.
Very.
And that's something that you didn't charge them for.
I did charge them for that.
But
when I trained for pageants, I did charge them. You're probably thinking about how I run my agency, and that's right.
And I'll take that.
I know they seem very similar, but pageants and modeling are completely different.
I just see toddlers and tiaras and think this is like, there's just some mum that's like, you're gorgeous, you're going to throw you on stage.
Anybody that's listening out there that thinks that they want to get their young children into pageantry or modeling, I do not support it. Okay. I have 2 girls of my own. I have a teenage girl, I have a young girl. I will never put any of them in anything until they get to
the age that they want to decide to do it.
Unless they're at least 16 and actually are genuinely interested.
Okay.
I am not for that. That's just a personal opinion.
No, I mean,
but that trickles down into my agency. Yeah. So just an FYI.
No, that's.
But the way I run my agency is a bit different. So when I started modeling and I started working in Dallas, back in that time, there were a lot of modeling schools. And most agencies that were not New York, Miami, Dallas, Chicago, LA, in order for them to make money and have a profit, they would create a school. And so they were expecting me to come in and do this $2,000 school, which of course I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And they overrode that and said, we believe in you so much, we're willing to override that. We'll represent you, train you, do whatever we need to do at no cost. And that has sort of been my motto at my company, because I feel like a lot of those schools will take talent that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, just for a paycheck.
Yeah, and the only way my company profits, the agency profits, is that when they work, I have a commission on that. And so I will only represent a model if I know that my clients will book him or her. And so that's sort of something that you will probably not see anywhere else, especially in a place like Oklahoma.
And you invest in them because, like you said, you don't get paid until they get booked. So you invest your time and everything to building them up, to making them who they are and making them the best of what they are.
And that's why I have outsourced my models that I place, because those girls take years. I'm talking like 5 solid years of development-ish. One of my girls at 13, I brought her in, and she didn't make money till she was 18. Yeah, I mean, and I practically raised her, So yes, it's a labor of love. So that's why I've had to outsource that, because I do have another job now, and that's my primary focus. And so my partner in Nashville and then my partner in Montreal do all the legwork for that now.
Awesome. You mentioned leading into, you stepping away and having a great team that takes care of the modeling side. And now you are into, architecture and working for Smith Pickel. How do you get from Brink to Smith Pickel?
Yeah, that was kind of a challenge. So I had my undergrad with interior design. I knew I wanted to come back to the industry, but not in interior design. One of the things I learned about myself with owning my business is that I'm more of an outward person and rather than a technical person. So, designers find themselves in front of the computer all day working in, CAD and Revit, and that is probably not the best use of my skill set.
Right.
I think I can be more useful elsewhere. And when I was looking into it, I was looking at architecture, I was looking at structural engineering. And at the end of the day, somebody just randomly mentioned construction. I was like, no way. I went to meet with the director at the OU graduate program and sat with him, and I thought, wow, this really fits my personality. Yeah. I could do this. I already have the design background. I understand that portion of it. I don't know that I necessarily needed to get another degree, but I wanted to requalify myself. And so I got my master's in construction management. I was immediately picked up at Manhattan Construction 2 weeks into my program and started working, and just I haven't looked back since.
Yeah. So it's good. Back again, like I said earlier, back to like a reoccurring story and everything that you tie together, and the part that drives you. You could have just been like, I'm just going to go into construction. I don't really need to do my master's, but having that piece of paper and knowing that like I belong here anyway, and I have a piece of paper to say that I belong here because I've done the same courses that most of the people I'm talking to have done. Some people might not have just done that. Some people have just taken the easy road, right?
No.
And said, I can do this. Let me just do it. I don't need a piece of paper. I don't need to go learn stuff.
It was for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't for anyone else. And as I started working, I was told over and over that there was no need to continue. You can just stop studying. But I went through to the end, and I'm grateful I did, because it wasn't until the end that I really had to push myself into a new box that I had not ever been in, and that was doing my graduate research. And I, at the time, had already been working full time. So I jumped in prematurely, I will say, as a project manager, was not equipped to handle what I was about to take on. And it was like baptism by fire. I was barely in survival mode. And I thought to myself, I cannot gain 10 years of technical information in 1 year. So how am I going to deliver, because I was doing 2 projects.
Right.
How am I going to deliver these 2 projects and be successful? I got to do this fast. And so I thought, really, I think the way I can do this is if I have the proper communication with all the players on the team. And when you think about the team that you're managing, as a project manager in the field, you have the owner, you have the architect, and you have the contractor. And in the contractor team, you have a superintendent and you have a project manager. So the project manager is really the go-between between the superintendent, the architect, and the owner. And when you think about that, the superintendent is managing the subs. You have little to no education a lot of times in that realm. formal education, I should say. And a lot of the culture is very different. I mean, so many people like in and out of jail, and you don't know if they're showing up the next day, that kind of a lifestyle. Then you've got architects who are these creatives and thoughtful and never really in a hurry per se.
Yeah. They're artists, right?
They're artists.
They do what they do.
Exactly. I love that. I was there.
They don't
I was
like
a designer.
deadlines.
I've been there. And then you've got the owners who are typically highly educated, financially driven, really at the end of the day, driven by the budget and the schedule. So I'm feeling the pressure to make the owner happy. And in order to make the owner happy, I also have to make the architect happy, who I actually don't have a contract with. The contract is just with the owner.
Yeah.
And then I also need to work with my superintendent and make sure that I am fielding anything that he might need or she might need and bring everything to the table. So I studied the relationship between these parties. I surveyed architects and owners and superintendents and project managers and thought, what are the main motivators that make you want to communicate? Because one of the other issues is that you get these 3 players into a team that have never worked together. They don't trust each other. They're all in it for themselves in a way.
Right.
How do you create that synergy? It's usually about a year's time, and create something that is going to be delivered properly. It's just so many moving parts. So anyway, at the end of the day, I studied this, and my professor that I worked with, the director, he and I decided he wanted to submit it to be published. And so it ended up being published, and I was supposed to present it in Liverpool last spring. But of course, COVID became an issue.
That would have been
so
really much. That would have been a lot of fun.
It's been rescheduled. So I'll be presenting it in Liverpool in 2023. And I'm really excited to bring something new to the industry because it's something that literally no one has ever studied.
Right. And that's just like the system that you're
it's
doing this research
and the motivating factors that
Yeah.
make people want to trust and communicate properly in order to get the work completed.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. You're standing in the middle of it, right? With a bunch of different personalities. Everyone's out there for themselves.
Right.
How do we get everyone going in the same direction peacefully?
Exactly.
Right? But
so that was my experience, and I moved from project management after I completed those projects, which I did deliver them on time, under budget.
Yeah.
My multifamily project I did was a historic preservation project on the northeast side on 7th and Lottie, Dunbar Elementary, and converted it to senior housing. It was the highest profit multifamily project at the time that we had at the company.
Yeah.
So I was really happy and pleased with how that turned out. The owner was pleased. And that moved me into a passion about the northeast side of town, which took me to moving into a new role for business development for the company, which they had never had that at the time. And then I also helped open a development division of the company where I was actually helping to create from inception the concept and the financial piece and the design that would we would implement into the project. And so one of the projects I brought in during that time was the Homeland Project on the northeast side, which is 36th and Lincoln. And as I got engaged on that project, I learned about the undertones of the neighborhood. I'd already been over there for a few years at Dunbar, but now I was learning something new about the food desert, about people feeling invaded in their community and feeling like the people that were developing didn't necessarily have their best interests at heart. And so I really tried to bridge the gap there. And one of the ways I was able to help facilitate that was to really understand and find and cultivate talent in the subcontractor base that were minority owned.
Yeah.
And so that began there. And then when I came to Smith Pickel, we have the Metro Tech bond. So we are working over, again, on the northeast side. And it's a primary goal for them to have minority sub-engagement. And as we are experiencing across the board this workforce development shortage, it's most especially hard to find minority subs. And we also work at Millwood Elementary and their school district. And again, that is their focus. So I think one of the ways that I've loved engaging in this side of town is trying to cultivate education and understanding. I had an African-American sub for my demo sub on Dunbar, and he was in my office for hours learning how to fill out the bond forms and how to understand how to appropriately fill out his pay app and, things that he was never privy to before. So this is just part of my role, is to help implement tools and teach the community so that we can all grow together.
Yeah.
And that they feel like they have a part and a hand in growing their community, and they don't feel like someone's coming in and disturbing their peace and their history.
Yeah. You are using everything that you did, like, you know, being a model and community building and giving back. Like, Matt hiring you is probably the best thing ever, right, for Smith & Pickel, because it all brings in everything that, like, I wonder what he was thinking when he did hire you. Like, probably thought, hey, I'm just going to hire Heather, she's going to do this cool stuff. But I bet you've blown his expectations out of the water by using all the connections that you've had.
You're very kind, but
and community stuff.
I think there was an irony behind us merging together in our work. I had known Matt. Actually, Smith & Pickel was the first company to offer me a job in the industry about 5-6 years ago. I ended up going with Manhattan at the time, but I always wanted to work for them. I just love the quality of their work, the art behind their work. I have an art history minor, so that is very important to me. That art is a part of our design, is a part of our construction. So I knew that. I knew their skill set. I knew that they were engaged in the community and a lot of organizations that I was also very engaged in. And when I found out that the person that was leading the role that I'm in now was leaving, I reached out and we grabbed coffee, and he said, Matt said, when I found out that this position was coming open, I wrote down 3 names, and you were one of them. And then you reached out like an hour later.
Right.
And so the timing was right. And I was like, well, don't you need my resume or something? And he's like, nope, I'm good. Let's just go.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So I think he probably had paid enough attention that he knew what I would bring to the table. And I think one of the things that I love about Matt's thought process, he's a great leader, by the way, but he took a company that was huge, over the Chesapeake years.
Yeah. And
when, Chesapeake took a nosedive, well, I don't want to say that. My husband works for Chesapeake. But,
I did not know that.
When Aubrey McClendon passed away, and a lot of our clientele just dropped off because of that, because he was kind of the mastermind behind a lot of that. And Sam Smith and James Pickel sold the company to Matt. Matt took what I would call a sinking ship and really kind of steered it and turned it around. And the way he did that was by thinking outside of the box and thinking about things differently. And one of the things I think that I really like about his foresight is that he always tries to bring in a team, as far as their management side, that is not standardly in the industry. Yeah. Some people that are in other roles and that have something completely different to offer, but have the capability to address the needs of the system, right? And so I think we have a really diverse thought process and background.
Yeah.
Almost none of us come from construction on the team.
Which is great, right? Because like you said, it brings a new look and new insight into things that, because things get stale, don't they? You get used to doing what you've done. If you've grown up in construction, because most of them are family businesses too, this is how it's always been done, so this is how we're going to do it. It works. But it doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't work to the most efficient that it can do. And then, like I said, when you bring people in that aren't necessarily born and bred and grown up around construction, like I said, they might have come from modeling or come from architectural art or whatever, and they can all do the job. You can create something really special by doing that. And I can't think of anything more gratifying than being involved in a project and then like a building, and then driving by that building every day, or that building's going to be here for 100 years maybe, or like it's not going anywhere.
It is absolutely
especially
rewarding.
The building we're in now, like the job you guys have done in this building is it stands out. It's awesome, isn't
this building I
know this building was super special anyway.
I call it the show pony. It's just it's stunning.
So different.
I obviously, I've had so much admiration for Rand Elliott. I was onto him when I was in design school, years ago, almost 20 years ago, and just have followed his work and have been a huge fan of him shaping our movement into a new type of construction. He was really the father, if you will, of that movement, and I have so much admiration for him. But this building, specifically the exterior, is just absolutely breathtaking. We just got this Blueprint 369 where it's on the cover. I mean, it's recognized worldwide.
Yeah. Well, and also like back to community, I asked Matt when we did the podcast to say, well, what's it like to have, like, you know, how do you feel when you drive past a building and you see that? I said, that must be really like cool. And he said, it is, but the coolest thing is the fact that his daughter is now taking classes here. Mm-hmm. And his answer to that, like most people like could have said, or I mean, I probably would have said, because I don't have kids, I'd be like, yeah, I built that. Like, I'm going to stand in front of it every opportunity I get, because like, that's awesome. But he just like brushed it off as if to say it's not about like that. And I love that.
That is completely accurate. I feel like he and I share thought in that every project we see beyond the structure. What is its purpose? What is it doing for the community? How is it bridging a gap? How is it meeting a need? What is the purpose behind that? I've had a similar full circle experience with Dunbar. It's truly like my baby, but you know, this is its elementary school. It's the only original all-black school, 1924 built in, then. And we're working on the building, and the community, you know, the neighborhood wanted to come and tour it. So I ended up doing a tour for the JFK neighborhood, and several of the people on the tour said, you know, I went to school here.
Yeah.
I taught here. And I went to an event the other day, and one of the women said, my best friend lives there, and she went to school there. Mm-hmm. So to me, you know, the full circle and giving back and repurposing something that has memories and meaning behind it is why historic preservation truly is my favorite part of the game. And
I wish there was a lot more of that happen sooner.
We're doing a lot. We're about to do the armory.
Okay.
We're converting it to the Coop Ales headquarters.
Right. I did hear that.
Along with a mixed purpose of
that's going to be awesome.
Boutique hotel and restaurant and
exciting
tap room.
Future. For sure.
It'll be amazing.
Yeah. Anything else that's coming up other than the tap room that they're building for Coop that you're excited about?
Yes, I'm also excited about Harding School. It's another historic.
The Harding Charter Prep School, is that right?
Yeah, it's the historic building.
That's right.
That is also on docket to come after the Coop Ales. And then again, we are continuing to work over on the northeast side, hoping to work on the Edwards District area and Tabitha Church. And then I've also been engaged a lot in the tribal work lately, and I feel like it has a similar purpose to the northeast side in that their main goal in their work is to educate their people.
Sure.
I think I feel an obligation to help to train and help to create pathways for people that don't have education to be in the industry that want to be, to do that. Again, the workforce development is high on my list. Yeah. And so I find that it's a similar purpose behind the tribal work. So that's been a huge focus of ours as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting, and I like listening to the whole story. It's awesome to kind of piece things together and bring things, you know, like I said, back full circle from meeting people out at buildings that you're doing work on, you know, the schools, or bringing, you know, community and giving back all the way through the modeling stuff to having a modeling agency, training models, and then going into construction and figuring out how can we give back to the community, how can we also increase the workforce, build up the community. No doubt, you know, you're speaking Spanish, like you mentioned, comes back full circle there as well. So that's really cool to see, and you know, just listening to everything, you're continuing to push things, right? Like you said, Matt knows that you have two things. You're like fully on or fully off, and it's, you know, it's exciting to see where you're going, and I'm sure Matt's super happy to have you, and you know, the city's better off for having you and Smith and Pickel working towards it. So I am going to bring something back that I haven't done in a long time. Quick fire round.
Oh wow!
We'll see how this goes. It's been a while.
Back to Toastmasters.
This is totally different topics, but favorite movie.
My favorite movie historically has been Thoroughly Modern Millie. Okay. I'm a huge 20s era fan, and that includes Art Deco, the clothing, the movement behind women, the jazz music is my primary genre, all of the things, and that movie encompasses all of those things. Okay.
Favorite song at the moment?
Moon River is historically my favorite song. It comes from the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. I really like Jane Monheit's version of it. She's also a jazz musician.
There's a reoccurring theme here.
I know.
There's a jazz thing.
Preservation, jazz. I feel like I was a 20s girl in the modern era.
what it would have been like to go back then and see that lifestyle. Amazing. Favorite restaurant in Oklahoma City? That's a tough one.
Metro.
Okay.
Metro Wine Bar.
What are you Googling right now? Like, what are you interested in right now?
Googling.
Something that's on the mind.
Well, I'm reading a book. Maybe that.
Okay. What are you reading?
Sort of Googling in my own way about that. I'm reading a book called Quiet.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand more about introverts and their thought processes and the difference between shy or
Right.
Antisocial and introverted. I just find it fascinating because I think sometimes they're overlooked, and I know several in my own life, including one of my children, and I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about what they need in order to feel like they're contributing.
Yeah. And better ways to have conversations with them yeah.
It's just a different approach than how I would be approached, and so it's kind of helping me learn something
That's
new.
really cool. You don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but what is your kind of, I guess, guilty pleasure that you might be embarrassed about saying?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that I drink Diet Dr. Pepper like all the time. And I don't know if it's because my stepdad growing up he was like addicted to it, and it's like kind of like a memory or something, but I feel like I'm too old for that.
I was in Arcadia yesterday and stopped off and got some real pop.
I probably should quit, but
no, you don't want to do that.
At this point, it's too
it's part of you, isn't it? Like, if I've done this,
It's not like that terrible. I'm sure I could come up with some way worse ones. That would be way more embarrassing.
And then last one, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Well,
which is probably tough because you've done a lot of things.
The only thing I can really come up with right now, because I'm always kind of looking to the future. I do think at some point I'll probably get involved in lobbying.
Okay.
I've never been a politician or politically charged or moved by anything in particular, but as I've learned more about public policy and gone through several leadership programs in the last few years, certain things have come to light that I feel like I care enough about and could be educated enough about to advocate for. And obviously one of them is the vertical construction industry, which we don't have a lot of people there at the Capitol representing on that end. We have a lot on the road and bridge side, but and then also the workforce development is really a primary thought process. I think lobbying is interesting to me because I don't want to be out on the forefront. I want to be kind of behind the scenes, moving things forward. I prefer to be on the back end of things, and have since probably I started my company. I just have found that I thrive more on the backside because I feel like I can drive the ship a little bit easier.
Yeah,
because I can
everything from the back.
You step away and you see where it's going, and you can navigate it a little bit easier than being just out there in front all the time. And so I think at some point my career will lead me in that direction.
Awesome.
And it might be coinciding with what I do now, and it might be completely separate. I have no idea.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and share. There's a lot of things that you do, and I'm sure we missed a few things, but it's awesome to see what you're doing. It's awesome to see the community impact that you're building through Smith and Pickel, and just the stuff that you're doing with them. If there's anyone listening that feels moved and just has resonated, something we've said has resonated with them, how do they get in touch? It might be someone's listening who's a mother that wants to get in touch about learning about her daughter, whatever it is. How do they reach out?
I would say probably my biggest platform, if you will, is Instagram.
Okay.
I'm pretty active and pretty accessible there, and my handle is Rouba, Rouba. I'm also on LinkedIn, and then of course you can always go through smithandpickel.com website or brinkmodels.com website, but I feel like I'm pretty easy to get a hold of if you need to.
Awesome. Well, for those listening, I'll put the links to Heather's contact information down there. You can go and hit her up if you have any questions. But thanks again for coming down. I really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling an Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Also, huge shout out to RCB Bank for jumping on board to be a sponsor. RCB Bank's loan promotion is here for a limited time. Head into any of their 40 Oklahoma locations to get as low as 1.79 APR on your next car, boat, camper, or ATV. Apply online at rcbbank.com. RCB Bank, that's my bank. Rate and finance with approved credit, restrictions apply, and member FDIC. Huge shout out to my sponsors. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.